This is True Warrior in Lipstick by CGP. This episode is brought to you by Pause for Supplement, integrating rhythms of reflection to cultivate a contemplative practice to nourish the soul in microdose short form. Available via YouTube at True Warrior in Lipstick by CGP. Welcome to the pilot episode of Configurations and Conversations, where I feature a special guest to speak on sojourns and spheres and accentuate fellow warriors who took transformative tides of transits, transfiguring traumas into testimonies of triumph. Today's guest is Hollie Meador. We hope you enjoyed this episode and find some insights into parallel energies present in your astrological chart that may serve as a guide in your journey. Let's take a listen. Hello everyone, I'm Cheryl G. Paho. Today I'm joined by a wonderful human, a good friend, and peer, Hollie Meador. Welcome, Hollie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I would like to start by highlighting, and Hollie delighted us to be our first ever special guest for the pilot. And I do want to point out, as we're recording this, it's a Saturn day, and the moon exalted in Taurus and Venus exalted in Pisces. Conversely, Hollie and I share the same zodiacal sign placements. Taurus as our 9th house, where astrology is, and Pisces in the 7th house, where you have your one-on-one relationship with the other. There is actually a sextile between the two goddesses at this time via whole sign house system, which is the system that Hollie and I both use. Let me introduce beautiful soul Hollie. Hollie is a mother, a friend, a yoga instructor, and astrologer, currently living outside of Austin, Texas. She co-owns a yoga studio centered around building community, where she has the opportunity to teach and learn from people of all ages. She is attuned to increasing awareness of the depth and expanse and sacredness of this human experience, observing all the ways our stories weave together. Nothing brings her greater joy than witnessing the joy of her own children. She considers herself a lifelong learner. Indeed, indeed. Welcome. Please go ahead and share your sun, moon, and ascendant, and your sect.
Yes, okay. So I'm an Aquarius sun, Pisces moon, Virgo rising, and I'm of the night sect. I'm Team Moon.
Yay. So, Hollie and I share moon as our luminary in chief.
Yes, yes. What a time.
Walk us through your journey in astrology, Hollie.
I feel like all of my paths have just been sort of long, winding roads, which I think even reflect the more I learn about astrology, the more I contemplate all of it, I feel like it really all reflects in my chart as well. Yeah, I feel like I just take a long time to get to where I'm going, and that's okay. I've learned to accept it. But my journey, I've always had an interest. I can't say exactly when it started or where, but I was aware of it from a young age. And I remember at some point, I think in college or just right out of college, I had this huge printout of not just the sun sign. It was like the first time I had really seen how all the planets are at play in your chart. And I was like, this is so much information. I used to carry it with me and reflect on it, but I didn't really know what to make of it. I started working in a yoga studio, and Vedic astrology kind of goes hand in hand with yoga, and one of the owners at that studio was actually a Vedic astrologer as well. And I never got a reading from him, but I became, aware of more of the things that happen, like Mercury retrogrades, and everyone had the little stigma around that, I guess. And that was kind of the first time I became aware of those cycles within cycles, and I had never really considered the the cycles of planets, aside from, the sun and the moon, and that we're all going around the sun. I just didn't ever think about that the stars, individually have their paths as well. Yeah, after having my first kiddo, probably around the time, it was in between having my first and second child, I met an astrologer who he studies modern astrology. And after my second son was born, he offered to look at our charts, like look at my chart. And it was the first time I had really had a reading. And what he was able to illuminate and know about like my 3-year-old at the time and his little brother and their relationship or like, not their relationship so much, but like their relationship with like their dad and like with me and just all of it. I was like, wow, you can see all of that like in their chart. And he had never really met my kids, but this astrologer had never met my kids before. So it's like, okay, there's something to this. And so I started studying on my own, more in the modern way. Then when we met together in our nightlight astrology studies, I entered that knowing it was Hellenistic, knowing it was a different form, and kind of thinking, well, I really like Adam's way of presenting information, and I valued the way that he saw the sacred and everything. And it's like, I think I could learn from him, but I think I'll just pick out and like apply some things to what I already know, because I don't need the whole house system. I don't need these things, but I'll just take this. And then we got into the studies, and I was like in tears every day with how beautiful it is and how poetic it is. And really just like realized I had to dismantle everything I knew and rebuild again. So that's where I am now after 3 years of first starting those studies. I feel like there's always more to learn. And I'm just really grateful for the practice, and seeing the ways it overlaps with so many other things that I'm interested in and studying.
I love it. Holly and I can definitely geek out on astrology, and we've done it plenty of times on Saturn Day, where we contemplate on the beauty and poetry and sacredness of astrology, and what an honor and privilege it is to be initiated and invited to this practice, and to be under the guidance of Adam of Nightlight Astrology. Thank you, teacher. It is a mystical and awe-inspiring journey, I think, just getting called and drawn into the practice of astrology. So I realize as we sojourn this lifetime, there are a lot of configurations that would really call us and invite us to be curious. But what are the transformative transits that's potent in the last few years for you, and what were they, and what called your curiosity for more awareness, and were you already an astrologer then?
I feel like a lot of my journey, like I said earlier, it's like this unfolding. I don't know that there are many times, except for, I will say, in the recent past, I feel like maybe it's more with my deeper awareness of astrology and the current transits, I'm able to like pinpoint things a little bit more. But now looking back in my own timeline, it's hard to say like there's a day that certain things happen or shift or change. I kept looking back and seeing these ways that, it's actually like this 5-month-long journey where certain things unfolded in my life, or even having my kids and all this Saturn play of like a 4-year journey and what that looks like. But as you were talking just now, and even reflecting on the current transits, and that the moon is in the 9th house, I will reflect on like May of 2000. So at the time I was in my 3rd year at the University of Texas. I was studying photojournalism at the time. That's what my degree is in as well. But I was also on the women's swim team. I had swam from the time I was like 9. It was a huge part of my life. And that year I'd had a couple really difficult years with training and just with illness and injuries and stuff. And that year I really like gave it my whole heart, and I was really interested in the things I was studying as well. I was in this photojournalism program, and it was really demanding and took a lot of my time. So I was just like constantly going and working, but I liked all of it. But then the swimming part just didn't really, it was just time. I think it was just time to like let it go. And actually my photojournalism teacher had to talk with me at one point. And he's like, I think you're going to have to make a choice. He was actually very Buddhist. He was a little intimidating, but he was a practicing Buddhist, I came to find out. And he was also very stoic, but he was just like, I think he like looked at me with his hands together and was like, Hollie, you're going to have to make a choice. He's like, because I don't think you can do both things. And I was like, okay, I'm taking that to heart. So I gave it my heart the rest of that semester in swimming, finished the season, and I tried to come back our season ends like in April, and I tried to come back when it was time to come back, and my body just like wouldn't do it. And so I retired. I remember walking off the pool deck, and I ended up getting a job. At that job, I met who's now my husband. It was actually May 4th of 2000. But during this time, I also was studying photojournalism. I was also studying, I was doing some religious studies courses, and that had sort of opened my eyes to a lot of different cultures and mythologies and stories that I had never heard before and that were just fascinating to me. And one of the things I love about photojournalism is the documentation of stories and capturing moments and really sinking in to tell a whole story, you know? And I was like, I'm going to travel, and I'm going to stop swimming, and I'm really going to focus on these other things that I'm passionate about. And then I met my husband, and in some ways I thought we would like kind of do these things together. He seemed passionate about traveling, and but then, okay, so I won't get into like how our life has unfolded, but I'll just look at like the transits on that day. I could talk forever. We could talk forever. So May 4th, I looked back at the chart, and my 9th house is just loaded. It's just loaded. And I can't recall in this moment what all the planets that are there, but I know like towards the end, I think it moves into like June. I think there's a Jupiter Saturn conjunction even in the 9th, and like, so I'm not even gonna it just has all these planets. I should have written them down. Was drawing me in that direction. And so here's where I was saying, I think my paths take a long time, is that like I can spend a long time considering something before actually doing it. And sometimes I can beat myself up in thinking that like, oh, I should have just done the thing, you know, years ago. But then I also see how the different things that I did involve myself in, how those, you know, taught me something and wove into my life to create the reality that is now, you know. But yeah, that, which I think is partly Saturnian, in that my sun is in a Saturn ruled house. Saturn is in my first house, and I was born at night. So that makes like Saturn, my malefic, out of favor. So I feel like it does there's always sort of this like pulling, this like, I don't know, I can't quite describe it. It's like it feels like a slowing down in some ways that seems inhibiting in some ways, but also not. Like, I know that's part of my nature to move a little slower. And I have found in the not so distant past ways to like accept that part of me and embrace it a little bit more. And the more that I embrace it, actually, like, the more speed I have in things. I don't know how that makes sense at all, but the more speed, meaning like I'm able to make choices a little bit quicker, and I'm able to actually put action behind my ideas and concepts and stuff. So that has been pretty cool. So who knows, Jupiter's going to move back in there in a couple years, and Saturn not far behind it. So just who knows what the future holds.
Right. You're right. Saturn being in the first, also the ruler of the dispositor of your ascendant ruler, right? So, which again, we shared, although I have a Capricorn stellium, you have an Aquarius stellium, and we both have Saturn as our ascendant ruler as a dispositor. So it really does play a big potent role, Saturn, right? Would you say that Saturn placement on the first opposing the moon as well played a push and pull, right? In terms of the moon representing the mind and amongst other, other things. And Saturn, to an extent, could also have some say or prominence, if you will, in terms of internal ruminations, right? Like Saturn being a contemplative archetypal pattern. What would you say were like the potent energies in these transformative transits that were having like a loud megaphone, if you will? And of course, Saturn being in the first house, that in itself being in an angular house is already loud. And also the moon being in the seventh is also loud. So I realized that contrast and then that pushing and pulling, right? Between those two energies.
I can reflect back on that time and remember a lot of it. But again, it's like I have never been one to just like decide something and then move forward with it. So maybe that is reflective in sort of that opposing pull, of energy. But I have found that I tend to get in places where maybe I've been considering something for a long time. Like, for instance, in that situation, I had considered retiring for quite some time. And I'd had some injuries and some illness. And I was just like, do I need to keep doing this? Do I want to keep doing this? Why am I continuing to do this? And I'll go on a really long walk. Like I'll find myself in a position where I have to go on like a really long walk. Like my car was specifically, I remember contemplating this, but it was like a year and a half before I actually moved forward with it. Where I lived with like 7 people one time over a summer, and I got like blocked in. My car got blocked in and my roommate didn't want to move it, and she was just like in a mood, and I was like, fine, I'll just walk. And I walked like, I don't know how far across the city to get to my friend's house. But it was amazing and wonderful, and it just like, it gave me perspective. But that was one of the things I remember contemplating along the way. And, I stuck with it for another year and a half. I mean, the same is kind of true where there was a lot of Saturn influence in my life of having my kids. And just prior to that, I had been working at this yoga studio for like 4 years and thinking about doing teacher training. Do I want to do teacher training? I think I want to do it. I think I would enjoy teaching yoga. And going through that all the time. And I had my Saturn return in September of 2008, but then I didn't actually sign up for teacher training until it started January of 2009. So it took me like almost a year and a half to like really follow through with the strong urges to do the thing. So I'm learning to listen to those energies a little bit more, like those nudges and those encouragements. It feels like things flow a little more steadily than have these big swaths of time where I'm just in my head,
Us doing this on a Saturn day, Aquarius season, Saturn in Aquarius coming into its last few degrees Saturn ingress in Pisces. But it feels like Saturn takes us
We're along for the ride.
Exactly. Would you say Saturn return, the energies of Saturn in those trances that you've mentioned had like this potent and prominent variable that's kind of leading and guiding, if you will, in the journey that actually brought in or invited you to manifest and express that inner warrior?
I guess so. It's been like just a steady path. It's funny. I mean, you say warrior. I don't know that I consider myself like a warrior.
Of course you are. You are a warrior, Hollie.
Well, thank you. I mean,
I feel like Saturn prepares us to be a warrior.
Maybe so. In this past year, I feel like I've kind of come to terms but Mars was my time lord this year, and I have Mars in the 6th as part of my stellium, and it's joy and, a place of service and of kind of daily toil. And I don't know, I was just reflecting on it a lot. This year kind of required a lot of extra work, a lot of extra attention to a lot of different things. but also just this like physicality of teaching a lot and being present and holding space a lot, and then like physically like cleaning the studio. I think I had this revelation while I was like mopping. Like, oh, this is like, I can keep doing these things because I have like the gift of Mars in the sixth with the sun and Mercury, and like there's a lot of, I guess in that sense I can see it for sure. I enjoy working, with the right thing,
right?
Working in service and working definitely speaks to my heart. So
that brings me back to your Aquarius stellium, right? That and ruled by Saturn in the first. Given that it is Aquarius season and you being our celebrated Aquarian, how did this stellium manifest its potency and showcase any guidance, if you will, in those trances?
I think I have some I don't know what to call it, I guess some fortune with there being mutual reception with Mercury
right.
and Saturn.
Right.
So they were like co-hosting each other.
Right, as a mitigating factor, right?
Yeah. So, but it's funny, bringing this up because part of like what really at the beginning of our studies with Hellenistic astrology, there are sort of these terms that on the surface can seem very limiting and also a little bit damning in some ways. I found out, the sun is in detriment in Aquarius, and I was like, well, what does that mean? That's like, that's my sun, man. What are you talking about? And then learning about sect and like, oh, the sun is like not even in its state, like it's not even happy,
right?
like it's especially not happy. But and then I was like, okay, I have the moon. And I've always felt very connected to like my emotional self. And I think like when I first learned that, I started really just latching on to like the moon, and I sort of like disregarded the sun in general. This is going to sound weird at first, but like I feel like I sort of, I don't know, I was like, well, there are planets. I have planets under the beams in the sixth. It's this place of like ill health and slavery, and I was just like, I have Saturn in the first, and like I'm just like in tears, and like there's just no hope for me ever. And anyways, I had to like let that like wash over. What so in the not so distant past, one of the styles of yoga that I teach is called yin yoga. And we use traditional Chinese medicine as sort of a guiding philosophy, as we're sort of working with, so the fascia lines that are sort of a new anatomical discovery. I'm sure you didn't think the conversation was going to go here to like connective tissue, but here we are. I love it. Okay.
Well, Saturn still rules the tissue, right? So, hey, Saturn, yes, tissue, the bones, the teeth. So here we are, Saturn just manifesting.
That's wonderful. So the fascia, it's the connective tissue, and it binds muscles together. It connects the muscles to the joints, and it carries like the fluid. It keeps everything like flowing, it like lets muscles glide against each other. It lets our joints kind of move. When things get really sticky and frozen, that's almost like the fascia getting really like tightly woven together, and it's hard for it to slide and glide as it should. The fascia lines overlay with the meridians, which have been around for thousands of years. The name for meridians, you're going to love this. Meridians actually means little rivers. And in Chinese, Saturn can be represented by bodies of water and rivers, like the boundary of rivers, right?
The boundaries of river, right?
Magical and amazing. Okay, so that wasn't even like the point I wanted to make. I was just like, oh, I have to say that too, because like it's amazing. So this thing, that has been around for thousands of years, and then like, okay, we have a modern discovery, and now we like, okay, well now it's valid. We can like overlay it on top of, traditional Chinese medicine in a way. But this practice of yin yoga incorporates these ideas, and these little rivers carry like the chi throughout the whole body, and in different seasons, different organs are under stress, and there's always a yin and yang organ working together in each season, and almost like the chakra system in yoga, where it's like this wheel, this spinning wheel of energy, wheel of light. There can be balanced state, there can be like an excessive state, and there can be kind of a sedentary state, you know. So things can be moving too quickly, too slowly, and then you have your ideal balance. Sort of the same is true for like planetary conditions, right? Like planets can be expressing in their most positive way or in like a shadow way. But okay, with yin yoga, we're studying like the seasons and the organs that go along with it, and the elements and like the emotions that come up at each time of year as well. So in winter, here we are in winter, and I've been able to contemplate, like really take a look outside and think about like, what is the sun doing, right? Like what is the natural state of the sun? What is like really the meaning of this time? And this isn't a time for the sun to shine really brightly. You know, this is a time for us to be a little slower, a little more internal, a little more reflective. And like, that's okay to not have to be like shining really bright all the time. You know, we need, like, the sun needs to rest too, to really properly do its job. And like, I believe that. And like give Helios a break from like, driving that chariot across the sky. Like, make the day shorter for him, would you? I'm just kidding. I've been really loving, and I could talk for a long time just about the nature of like the temple of Saturn, and really thinking of this time and what is being called of us, like what's being called out in us. And, you know, I think my mind is going to like all the celebrities and stuff we know who have Aquarius suns or strong Aquarius placements. I would say the sun, though, especially in this case where it's like in its detriment. And, you know, you can still make something of it. You call on other strengths, right? You can, I'm sure, I don't know any celebrities personally with an Aquarius, and I haven't talked to Oprah in a while. But like I feel like what I know of her, I feel like she does find time to rest. I feel like she does find time to like nurture herself. And she might have a totally different house placement than, I don't know her house placement at all, but, you know, that can call attention to different things on places where she shows up and where she, you know, needs maybe a little more self-care, maybe a little more attention in different places. I don't know Oprah at all, or her chart. I'm just talking. I know she's an Aquarius. Right. Others with a stellium here, it's like we all have a choice ultimately of how we move through. And I think so much of it comes down to like getting familiar with like what is. Like, I love the imagery of thinking of a planet visiting a house, and like really what is it like in that house, and like what's going to be expected of them. And maybe sometimes it's good for like the sun to not have a lot of expectation, you know, sometimes, and to just quietly, sometimes I do feel like I just quietly like go about my business, and I may not have like 10 million followers on whatever it is, but I also trust that like the things I say and the things I do will matter to some, and that part of what I love also is like really deep, intimate connections and conversations, and my hope is to really like sink into more of those, and whatever comes of that, and however that ripples out, you know, is more than enough. So yeah,
that's beautiful. It's beautiful, Hollie. Thank you so much for that. I think I'm more in awe because every time we have this conversation, I see Saturn in a different light from an Aquarius energy standpoint, and with your stellium just emanating. especially when we were doing it on Saturn Day. And I see there is that noticeable disparate qualities of Saturn, having a Capricorn stellium, however, also having a night chart. So also having Saturn in its joy in the 12th, although the malefic out of sect, but in mutual reception with the sun, right? So that's a little bit of a mitigating factor, but it's such a joy to just see Saturn expressed through your Aquarius stellium and how you're emanating that into the realities of the material plane. And with your moon in Pisces, just that wisdom of Saturn from an air expression, right? From Aquarius, as opposed to Saturn expressed in an earthly expression in Capricorn. It's a beautiful reflection of the Saturnine energy expressed. Do you have any additional insights or words of wisdom to those listening who may have a similar transit, or who may have a Saturn return coming up, particularly in the first, or something being activated in Aquarius, this Aquarius season? Any words of wisdom you want to add?
I mean, I've only had the one Saturn return.
Right.
But I mean, it was, it shook things up, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, we're never really static,
right,
anyways. And I feel like Saturn, like, really gets a bad rap in that, like, yeah, there is, you have to kind of come to terms with things as they are, and then decide, like, do I want to keep doing this or not? And, like, there's nothing really wrong with that. I feel like the Saturn transits have all sort of gotten a bad rap in some ways. Like, overall, when I reflect back on it, it was beneficial. Saturn gets a bad rap in general. Really, it's there to just kind of wake you up to the reality of what is, I think. And see if I feel like Saturn comes in and asks, like, okay, here is where you are. Is this what you want to be doing, or do you want to be doing something different? And, if it's what you're doing, like, keep on, just, like, awesome. And if it's not, then, like, you might need to change some things, or not, but then, like, later you might, like, who knows? I'm grateful that, in my first Saturn return, that's when I I was doing graphic design at the time, and I didn't want to just be on the computer all the time. Did the teacher training, and now I kind of do both, with the way that the world has gone. But I'm grateful for that initial, like, shake up and transition. And we think about Saturn. I was saying it gets a bad rap, and just through all of its transits, like, we think about, like, Saturn opposition at 14, the first one that comes at 14, and how it's just, like, angsty teenagers or, like, disrespectful teenagers. It's like, well, no, what if we could, like, rephrase that to be, oh, they're having their Saturn opposition, and like, this is naturally a time for them to kind of look back at where they've come from and think about it. Like, what do I want to carry with me into my adolescence, into my young adulthood? Or what do I not want to carry with me? And, like, that's all totally valid. So I don't know. I'd like to kind of rewrite it, even for myself, working with my own kids, of, what do these transits, what are they actually, like, bringing up and saying? And then, as far as, like, transits through Aquarius, I was a little bit nervous with, like, Saturn and Jupiter moving through there, especially it's my 6th house over the past couple of years, and moving over my stellium. And I can't say that there was anything in particular that stood out to me, like, health-wise, or feel like there was it was kind of an increase in my teaching. So there was some relevance there, perhaps. I know Pluto is about to, ingress into Aquarius, and I can't say there's not trepidation there. But I also feel like over the course of the last year, I've learned
a little bit. I'm still, constantly learning how to look at the current transits and really consider like seeing the patterns in transits, I should say. The recent Mars retrograde really helped me see a few things where potentially, I don't know for sure, but that I may have avoided illness based on some transits that were coming up. And, just shifting like, okay, I know that these things are coming up and they've kind of been here before. And I kind of got, I was like sick then. And so how can I'm feeling maybe in a similar way, how can I address this now as we move, in the next few weeks, there might be similar energies, so how can I see a lot of people around me sick. How can I try to stay well? And, so far it worked. Also little things of just like paying attention to the transiting moon and really recognizing the way, I know it's my sect light, but it moves the fastest through the zodiac. So it's a great way to see your response to all the energies, really react accordingly, plan accordingly. I've started to do that with both of my kids and pay attention to when the moon is moving through their natal moon sign. And because I noticed a pattern of just a little bit more, more tension for whatever reason. And now I can like attune to that and tend to it proactively. And so that's really cool. So that's kind of what I plan to do with Pluto as well. I've never had a Pluto transit over my stellium, so it's going to be an interesting however many years.
Right. I feel like highlighting the essence and salience of service in your life, I feel like with Pluto coming there would bring so much unraveling of what service could look like in the years to come for you and for those you serve, right? That's my hope and prayer, that's what Pluto brings. And I appreciate your time and your presence and your energy, Hollie. What are you working on and where can people find you?
Well, I have a yoga studio in Austin. It's called Studio Satya. And I teach babies, toddlers, kids, tweens, teens, adults. I teach everyone. It's wonderful. And I've started hosting an Astro Yoga Circle. Wonderful. I had my first one on Thursday. So kind of looking at some of the things I was talking about where contemplating the season, how it overlays with not just yin yoga, but it can give us places to meditate and integrate into the body. So I've started doing that. We'll do that once a month. And then I'm starting to do more like readings as well.
Beautiful.
So I have a website. It's called The Rainbow Weaver.
Wonderful. Hollie, thank you so very much for your time. I appreciate your presence, your being, and your energy. And thank you for being my Saturnine soul sister. You're a blessing.
It's a great honor, Cheryl. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Hollie, for your gift of Aquarian delight. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time.